Welcome to State of the World, our very first episode with me, Sally Lockwood in Dubai.
And me, Palmeri in New York and often in DC.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Our very first show. We don't expect to have many viewers, so you guys who are here for the ride will get to see us making all our mistakes and talking over each other.
Oh, that's what we do in American television. Talking over each other is required. So, we'll bring both of our sensibilities to that.
But I suppose we should probably tell people a little bit about how this has all come about. So Tara and I are great friends. We also are big supporters of each other's work as journalists. My background is more international news. So we're bringing our specialisms and our contact books together to bring you this new weekly show, State of the World. Still brand new in its infancy. This is number one. So you're here to see us.
Sally is being bashful. She has been on the ground in war zones. She's covered Ukraine, Afghanistan. She's been in the West Bank. Like, when there is a fire, Sally runs into it. She gets the story on the ground. So this is a really great melding of the minds. I'm based in New York and DC. I've been a political reporter for almost 2 decades now. I talk to people at the highest levels of power in Washington to try to understand what are they thinking as they drive the world forward? What is this crazy train that we are on right now, and where is it even going? Is there a method to the madness? And this is where Sally and I trade our reporting and our insider views and help you understand what's happening so that next week is less of a surprise, you could say. Can't believe we're here, Sal. We made it. We're doing it.
I know.
This is exciting.
I know. You first called me about this a few months ago, and I was like, "Oh God, it sounds like such a good idea." How are we going to do that? How am I going to get all the equipment? I don't know what I'm doing. I always need a producer.
I'm just like, Sal, quit your job. This is going to be great. And you're the only person I know who'd be like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it.
I found that really embarrassing, by the way. You're so American. You're so over the top and gushy, and I'm the embarrassed Brit. So we're going to be a really good combination.
Totally. We're going to be yin and yang.
Should we start talking about all the stuff that's happening at the moment? It's been a busy week.
Yeah, let's get into it.
I think we kick off with the Ukraine stuff first, because Donald Trump has been speaking to Vladimir Putin and Zelenskyy in the last week. So let's get into the Zelenskyy call first, Tara. So Donald Trump and Zelenskyy have now spoken on the phone for the first time since that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office. But it seems like the phone call went pretty well. How are relations now? What are you hearing?
I think Donald Trump had to do this sort of theater to show that he was standing up to Zelenskyy for his base. It's very much over the war in Ukraine. A lot of Americans, obviously, it's becoming increasingly unpopular to continue supporting the war. So Trump had to do this. He had to also show a little bit of follow through, I think, in his mind, in terms of saying the mineral deal was off.
So is it more about perception for Donald Trump, how this looks to his base, rather than actually wanting to secure some sort of deal that is a good deal financially for the US?
I mean, the deal as it is right now isn't terrible for the U.S. We get rid of our old equipment and we give it to Ukraine, and then we restock the piles. Ultimately, for Donald Trump, this is a lot of ego. He desperately wants to be a Nobel Peace Prize winner. It really bothers him that his bête noire, Barack Obama, received one and he didn't. And, he said on the campaign trail, I will solve the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. It's been about 8 weeks right now.
On the ego stuff and the flattery and the relationship with Putin, Trump and Putin have also spoken, and there was this attempt by Donald Trump to create an agreement where they could have a 30-day ceasefire, and Putin flatly rejected that. How does Donald Trump present that to his base or to America as any sort of success when it comes to being the deal maker that he claims to be? Is he looking weak?
I think what's happening right now is that President Trump is being sort of backed into a corner in some ways by Putin. He's going to have to stand up to him at some point. That is not something he wants to do. And so what I think is if he sees that if there is not a sort of financial arrangement that gives him cover, so everyone needs cover right now.
I think it's important to make clear that the three positions are so far apart. You've got Zelenskyy on the one hand, who wants to maintain Ukrainian sovereignty and Western support. You've got Putin, who has these, prerequisite, requirements for any sort of ceasefire or peace plan, which is, no Western support, no intelligence sharing. You need to give up the land that we already occupy. You can never join NATO, various other demands.
No EU.
And at the moment, definitely it feels like Putin somehow knows how to play Trump, right? So Trump comes off these calls with Putin and he says these, positive things, and Putin goes public from the Kremlin saying, all we want is peace, yet his actions say something completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing's
bombing
changed.
within hours.
Will Donald Trump toughen up when it comes to dealing with Putin? Do you think that might be the next step?
No, because he hasn't historically, so I think he thinks he's just going to make a deal.
Is he going to lose interest in these foreign policy issues soon? Certainly if he can't brag about a deal, which, to be honest, in Ukraine, it's certainly not going to be the peace that he claimed he was going to bring in 24 hours of arriving in office. But, the reality on the ground for people in Ukraine, it really hasn't changed that much in terms of being bombed. I was speaking to a contact in Kyiv who said they're living on their nerves now, since Donald Trump took office, and they feel very vulnerable now, without the guarantee of US support, and that they live one day to the next worrying about what he's going to say and do next. But one difference that they have noticed on the ground in Ukraine is that since the USAID funding was paused, she said that what that was doing and making a real difference for them in Ukraine was that when energy facilities were hit, she said USAID funding was helping getting the energy back online. And she said, and since the funding's been paused, now it's not happening as quickly.
Right.
Is there any sign that funding pause is going to be lifted anytime soon?
No. USAID is a skeleton of what it was. I don't think it'll ever resume to be what it was in the past. I mean, people in Africa are now finding their graves because they can't get the pill that stops them from going from HIV to AIDS. USAID is pretty much dead. It's a sad place to be in. But I mean, I will just say from the U.S. perspective, and I think this is fair to say, is that will the Europeans come in there and try to help with that? You know what I mean?
Well, that's a good question, because actually that's something I'm hearing out of Ukraine is that, there's a lot of concern about the lack of support from America and what Donald Trump might say and do next. But they've said it's shocked Europe into acting, right? Which they should have done a long time ago. I mean, there's been a lot of criticism about Europe freeloading on American military power and support for decades, right? Okay, Tara, let's just pause for a moment, because I'm going to bring in a guest who's in Ukraine, journalist, world affairs editor for the Independent newspaper, Sam Kiley, who is also going to be a friend of the show. Let me just see if he can hear us. Hi, Sam.
Hiya.
Hi, where are you? You're leaving Ukraine today, right?
I just left, I'm at Chisinau Airport in Moldova, waiting for my plane.
Okay. So how long was that drive out? That's a long old drive out of Ukraine usually.
No, it's not too bad, actually. It was 4 hours all told, so by the standards of escaping Ukraine, it was easy.
Where were you coming from?
I was coming from Odessa after a long tour, basically a great sweep around the eastern frontline cities, I guess.
Okay, so for people who aren't familiar with Ukraine, Odessa is in the very south, which is why it was quite a quick drive out for Sam to Moldova. And just for people who aren't familiar with the situation in Ukraine, commercial flights stopped going in and out of Ukraine when the all-out invasion began just over 3 years ago. So you have to drive in and out. And I've driven in from Poland and from Moldova before. It depends on where you're going in the country, because the country is absolutely enormous. So that's good that it wasn't a huge drive, Sam, because sometimes it's sort of 12 to 15 hours, right?
Yeah, but covering Ukraine, as you know, Sally, involves a huge amount of travel. So I've just been in Ukraine, I think, for 2 weeks. I think I did about 3,500 kilometers at least, maybe more. And that is just normal because it is vast and the distances are huge. And that speaks to the complexity of the war there. So you've got this incredibly long front line, 1,300 kilometers, about 800 miles. And then, of course, you've got the Black Sea as well for the naval war, which the the Ukrainians are winning, basically won it and driven the Russians out of the Black Sea almost completely.
Let's just talk about what things are like on the ground. I was actually speaking to a contact in Odessa just yesterday, and she said it's being hit a lot at the moment. There was an enormous airstrike. They were hit with shells, I think it was a couple of nights ago, and she said it was really, really bad. What was it like when you were there?
Well, I was there for that night. It was 2 or 3 nights ago. Not shells, missiles, Shahed drones mainly. It was the heaviest bombardment by drones, which come over in swarms, essentially these are cheaply produced Iranian-designed weapons that cost like $25,000, $30,000 to make, carrying about 40 or maybe 50 kilograms of high explosive. So bloody dangerous if they hit anything. Powered by a lawnmower, 2-stroke lawnmower engine with a primitive GPS system. So they come swarming in, and if they get through, they do a lot of damage. And they did quite a lot of damage onto the outskirts of Odessa the other night. And usually blended in with them, the Russians have the ballistic missiles, which they're hoping to get through, whilst the air defenses of Ukraine are distracted by these Shaheds. And that, of course, was all against the background of Vladimir Putin pretending that he was going to have a unilateral offer of a ceasefire against attacks against energy installations, which was an offer he apparently made to Donald Trump and followed it up by a range of attacks against energy installations, as indeed did the Ukrainians.
Something that has been really obvious, certainly during my time in Ukraine, is that a lot of the strikes that happen in cities all over the country aren't necessarily targeted. They feel really indiscriminate. So actually, it doesn't matter where you are in Ukraine, you never really know when you go to bed at night if you're going to be okay. Is that fair to say, Sam?
You're absolutely right, Sally. You've been here. You've experienced the indiscriminate nature of attacks. They also have very deliberately targeted attacks, sometimes very specifically on railway stations, such as in Kramatorsk in 2022, when more than 50 people were killed by an Iskander missile. I mean, the Russians are targeting facilities with pinpoint accuracy. They go after energy installations, they go after trains, and they go after human beings. In Kherson, they are deliberately and systematically and very personally attacking individuals with first-person view drones. The Ukrainians believe there's a drone training school on the other side of the river. It's only 500 meters away from the Russian positions. And the Russians are calling these safaris. They actually video their own atrocities, systematically killing civilians. And that is a city, like so many of the others that I visited across Ukraine, where they are adamantly opposed to a ceasefire because they don't trust the Russians to obey any kind of ceasefire. Right across Ukraine, from the president down, Sally, as you know, the attitude here is unless there is a socking great big stick that will be brought down hard on the head of the Kremlin in the event of a ceasefire violation or a peace deal, there won't be one, and the Russians certainly can't be trusted to agree to one. Or rather, they can be trusted to agree to one, they certainly won't obey one.
Certainly from all the Ukrainian contacts I've been speaking to this week, there is very little confidence in this ceasefire that's being discussed. Certainly it feels very far away for them in terms of reality. Sam, I know you've got a flight to catch. I'll let you go. It's been great to chat to you. Thank you so much for your expertise. Great to see you as always. Friend of the show.
You're very welcome.
Hope we're going to see lots of you.
Good luck.
Thanks, Sam. Take care.
Bye.
So that was Sam Kiley, World Affairs editor for the Independent newspaper, speaking to us from Ukraine. And that is it for our first episode of State of the World.
Thanks so much for joining. This is the first of many to come. We want to hear from you. What do you want us to cover next week on State of the World? We have the entire globe to cover after all. And if you tell us now, we can get to it and start contacting our sources and get down to it. And this is an evolving show. If you have any ideas about how we should do this, this is a community based on trust and our friendship and our love of journalism. So we hope you'll be engaged.
And as Tara said, this is just the beginning. We're just working things out. We're going to see where this takes us. The show may not look like this in a few weeks' time. I may be on the road traveling again, but we're definitely going to be doing a weekly show. So stay tuned and you can see how things evolve. And we're really, really happy to have you with us on this journey. So thanks so much for subscribing. If you're not subscribing already, please just hit that subscribe button at the top of the screen. It makes a big difference to us.
Cheers.